So, Linen, I'm going to be a bit. What's the word?
Cuntish.
No, I'm trying to be nice.
I mean, that is a word. You did just say what is the word.
What?
It's a word I would use. Continue.
Great way to start an episode off. But yeah, honestly, this episode originally, for context, everyone, we actually did record this episode a while ago, but being me, I ended up, of course, losing the files. Well,
Yes.
one file, but you can't actually put an episode out with one
it
file.
happens. Don't put yourself down. It happens. It happens to the best of them. We may not certainly be the best, but it happens.
Live and learn. But I thought it'd be good to at least re-record it just to still have it out there, because I enjoyed the conversation that we did have. The only downside is that it will be less in depth compared to the original one, which is unfortunate. But I would still like to have the basic strokes of it.
I don't know about you, but I don't remember every point we talked about, so we might just naturally hit the same points. So.
Hopefully. Yeah, we'll try our best. But yeah, I thought today would be quite fun to have a brief talk about fanfiction. And yeah, so for you, Linen, do you have any history at all with fanfiction for context for everyone?
To be honest, on my side, not really much contact with fanfiction. There's not really many fanfictions that I've actually delved into and gotten deep into. I would say the only ones is some loose Harry Potter based ones way back in the day, way back when I finished most of the films, and I was waiting for more films to come out, and I was like, well, I really need to fill this Harry Potter itch, and I didn't really want to read the books because I went through audiobooks with them, so I didn't want to take the time to go through the books again, and I felt like that was it for the world. So the next best thing is fan fiction, for it to fill that void that I was missing. I can't remember any names, so don't ask me any names of the fan fictions, but I've definitely read some, but I can't tell you which ones I've read. It's been a very long time, and I haven't been reading any fan fiction for a long time, actually.
Here's a curious question, though. Can you remember if they were good?
Some of them were, some of them weren't. I read a couple. Some of them were very, very creative, the way they introduced new characters and new, because it was Harry Potter based, it was new spells and things like that, and new areas of the Hogwarts castle that hadn't been explored, that people have imagined and made up themselves, because it's a magical castle at the end of the day. As long as your imagination allows it, you can probably just write anything. So there were some interesting points, and there were some that I read which was like, oh wait, this is just porn. At first it starts off with a really thrilling story, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is great, and then kind of into it, Ron gently caresses Harry's testes, or swish and flick the shit out of my wand, Dumbledore.
Oh.
And don't even get me started on Dobby's crusty sock.
God damn it.
So I mean, it's hit and miss with fan fiction. It always will be hit and miss. I started going into them thinking oh yeah, it would just be kind of story-based things. But there's a lot of fanfic porn. There's a lot. And a lot of that are unmarked as porn as well. So it's like you start reading it and you're like, hold on, this is getting very sensual. And this is not what I've come for, personally. Yeah. So that's my experience with fan fiction, pretty much.
Wow. Okay, well, quite a way to start off.
Oh, actually, now that it's come to mind, some other animes as well that were finished back in, this must have been early high school days for us. Okay. Very, very early high school days. There was a couple animes that finished, Guilty Crown and a few others, which I was like, oh no, I really want this world to continue, but there's nothing that from the official authors that allows more content. So the next best thing would be fanfic for it. So I did delve a little bit into the anime side of it as well, which I think was where I started to really kind of enjoy it when I did get into fanfiction a bit.
Okay.
But that is my general experience.
For me, it was actually quite different because, well, like anything you discover it through something else. For me, I actually discovered fanfiction through video games, and it was through a little known game. Well, I say little known; it's not exactly the most notable game series out there, but I'm sure people will know it. It's a game series called The Legend of Spyro.
What do you mean that's not a well-known game? Bloody hell! Anyone that's played video games knows what Spyro is. Hopefully, anyway. Well, in our generation, maybe not new generations of people. Maybe they don't have a clue what Spyro is now that you think about it.
Maybe.
But yeah, no, everyone should know what Spyro is, surely.
Yeah, they at least know Spyro, but yeah, I'm sure, and yeah, I'm sure there are people out there who don't know the Legend of Spyro specifically. Now, for a brief summary, it was basically just a trilogy of games that rebooted Spyro to be a bit more for teens, so it was a bit more mature with its storylines and the settings. It was basically like Lord of the Rings in a sense that it was about this chosen young one destined to fight evil, and he had to team up with
Yeah.
a band of plucky characters to help save the day. And it was honestly quite fun. And I discovered that basically randomly on YouTube. I found clips of the game, and I thought, "Oh, what's this? I've never seen this before. I'm curious." And I'm not a gamer at the end of the day, so I wasn't really compelled to play games.
Well, you
but,
weren't so much back then, anyway.
yeah, I mean, I play occasionally here and there, but even now, I wouldn't classify myself as a gamer.
Yeah.
But that one time, I saw this clip of this game, and I thought, oh, I want to see more about this. I want to know what the story's here. So I found one of those things where if you're on YouTube, you will find like people like make collages out of like game clips, and they basically make a little movie or a full movie out of all the cutscenes and such.
Yeah.
I basically found one of those of each game installment of the Spyro trilogy, and I watched the entire trilogy, and I fell in love with the story. Primarily, I just enjoyed the story so much because it ticked it ticked all the boxes at the time for me because I was in high school, still quite young, but really seeking a lot of more mature content. Because for context, a bit more for everyone, if you haven't seen any of our Doctor Who episodes, that was a time for me where Doctor Who, I think Matt Smith was the Doctor, and his Doctor was very goofy, very almost childlike.
Yeah,
And
yeah, he was. Yeah.
and I appreciate his take on the character now, but back then I was very much like, oh, I liked Tennant more. I don't like this whimsical.
It
very
did go
annoying
from
kid.
very serious to a bit more on the silly side.
Yeah, a lot more touching on the bit of the fantasy element to it. But at the time, I was like, I'm not enjoying this, and I almost debated even continuing to watch. Thankfully, I still did, but
It
I
got
was
better.
yeah, it got better, then it got worse, and then it could get better again. But that's another talk for another day. But yeah, so at that time, I was very much looking for other stuff to pique my interest and almost be taken a bit more seriously. And convenient enough, even though it is technically a teen kids game, the concept of this cute tiny purple dragon is in this world where war's going on, people have died, dragons are almost extinct, and there's this dark lord taking over everything, that's destined to fight you, and you have to fight him and save the world. It's like, what a young kid who loves fantasy and epic adventure would not love that concept?
Yeah, especially if you love that world already. So, if you're playing like Spyro and it doesn't quite give you enough, delving into like the fan fiction of Spyro would be the next best thing because it would just expand the world. It would make it so that it's a bit more for mature audiences because at the end of the day, Spyro, when it started off, was more of a kids' game, but the world that it delved into, you could delve deep into it to make it far more gruesome, violent, bloody, and just much more mature content. And that's what I like about fan fiction is that you can turn an already established universe into something slightly different. You could make Lord of the Rings happy-go-lucky. Like, you could make it all about the hobbits just having a great time, getting drunk in pubs. Who knows? Like, it's pretty much endless, and it's just up to the writing skills and the imagination of the author, which could be anyone.
Yeah, so So yeah, basically, that's how I discovered it, and I actually remember now what the original clip was that inspired me to check out the games. It was the soundtrack music piece for the ending of the third game. I think the song, it's a song. I think the song was called "Guide You Home." Very nice song, and that was basically that I have to thank that song for being the catalyst that led me to discover Spyro. And as you said, after I finished the game and that's where the story ended, I was like, I want to see more. I want to know what happens next. Did they, spoilers for the games? Did they survive? What happens to to him and Cinder? Are they together? Are they an item now? What happened to the other characters? What happened to the world? Is this the same world? Essentially, there was plenty of questions that I wanted the
Yeah,
answer to, and I knew there wasn't the fourth game, sadly. But I ended up trying to find out other stuff, and that led me to fanfiction. Now, it's been over a decade since then, so I can't exactly recommend any Spyro related stories that I can think of because honestly, I haven't delved into that a lot in like ages. But I have. It has kept me going in other areas of fandom because I think primarily it's just because there's so much good content for. There was so much good content for a time that it introduced so many variations that I could enjoy. Like for in the last 3 years, you've introduced me to anime. Well, 4 years, but yeah, you've introduced me to so many cool animes, and
yeah,
I've loved them for all they've been able to do. And that just opens up the floodgates really for me to discover new types of fan fiction that are part of those worlds. I think currently I think the biggest ones I've been delving into right now is still delving into really is My Hero Academia, and
yeah. Which we're currently watching as well.
yeah, currently on the sixth season, and Game of Thrones, surprisingly enough,
Mm.
despite
Game of
how
Thrones is a great world to dive into as well. Even regardless, outside of the books and the TV show, well, the TV show, outside of that, it's a very expanded world which has so much potential, which kind of feels abandoned. So that's where fan fiction picks it up and revitalizes it, gives it another breath of life, which is really, really, really endearing for like people who love that kind of world. Because I love the Game of Thrones world, and unfortunately the last season kind of killed it for me.
mm,
Like it made me not enjoy it as much, and I was kind of like, oh, that's very disappointing. you
you're
know
not alone there, mate.
yeah, well, yeah, definitely that, but this isn't a Game of Thrones episode, so
Yeah, I think that was our basic introductions of how we got introduced to it. Now, again, I feel like this has been a forever intro, but for people out there who don't know what fan fiction is on the basic terms, I mean, I actually can't remember. Did you briefly summarize it earlier? But
uh but yeah, no, I think I briefly summarized it just by saying fan fiction is basically authors that are not have nothing to do with the series or the books or anything like that, have nothing to do with the IP. um, just viewers and people that are passionate about the world. Say, let's take example Game of Thrones or Star Wars. People that love that world and they want to make their own characters, or they want to take characters and make them slightly different, change some things, write their own story within that IP. So that is basically a summed up version of what fan fiction is.
in summary, yeah, and that's really I think the main goal of making this episode was really just to highlight how it can be good
Yeah,
because the truth is that from based on my own experience at least I know for a fact, and as you said earlier, from your own as well, we both know there are some bad fan fiction out there.
yeah, and it can get a really bad rap because of it. I feel like fan fiction from when people hear fan fiction, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, and it's not been given a very good kind of, I don't know, feeling towards the word. It's the
Yep.
best way I can kind of describe it, because there is a lot of where when people say fan fiction, first thing that comes to mind for a lot of people, unfortunately, is pornographic content of that universe,
Mm,
because there is a lot of it out there. But that's not what fan fiction is. That is erotica fan fiction. That is completely different.
mm.
um, like just general fan fiction, I think people just have bad raps of it as well, because it's people are like, no, you can't take characters and change them. You can't do that. It's like, yes, you can.
Or you can't take existing IPs that belong to other people.
Yeah, as long as you're not profiting from it, you can.
Hmm.
It's within laws.
Yeah, I think at its core, fan fiction is basically people who don't own the IP, but they're fans, and they're basically just taking concepts, characters, or settings that they love, and telling a new story with them, or
Yeah.
telling a new story in a different take, and basically expanding the media with it. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, any good media, or any media in general, benefits an IP or a brand or anything really, especially if it's good enough or it piques the fans' interest. And sometimes, in certain cases, it can even uplift the fact that the original work 10 times fold.
Yeah, some
Or
people would just make it better.
or make it better. They make better versions of the story because the original ends up not living up to the
I
promises,
mean,
or it completely screws it over.
in terms of Star Wars, that's not difficult. Just saying.
Yeah, and Game of Thrones. But I believe fan fiction can be good, really, because again, I can't I could word this so much better, but how I kind of see it is that fan fiction, in a way, is basically seeing through the glass of the author creating their work in the moment. And because a lot of people, no shocker here, but a lot of people, when they're doing fan fiction, it can be within any range, but it's typically kids, people who are just learning, starting out
It's a
writing works.
yeah, a lot of creative writers kind of start off with fan fiction because it's already established universe, it's already established IP and characters that already have kind of in-depth stories about them, so you don't have to take ridiculous amounts of time building this whole world. You already have it set out for you, and then you can make your own story with it within that. So it gives a really good chance for new creative writers to kind of learn how to write, know what works, know what doesn't, with already lovable characters, which is a really, really good start point, I think, for new people starting out in creative writing.
Yeah, and as we said, for the IP itself, it's good because it generates interest. It generates people to appreciate the brand in a different light or in a different
Yeah,
way.
or expand to keep appreciating it as
Hmm.
well.
And for them themselves, it gives them the experience in being able to learn how to write and learning to accept criticism, or they can learn to realize, oh, this isn't for me, especially if they struggle with the criticism. It's a learning curve, really, and it's giving them experience without having to put through the effort or all the drama that would come with, okay, delve straight into writing a book, because that might be like how they did it before, or how professional people would say that's how you should do it. The truth is, though, that alone is daunting as hell.
Yeah,
So what would be the second best option that would not harm you, not put your name out there off the bat with, oh, this person wrote this book, it's shit, but they
it's
wrote a
terrible.
book.
Yeah,
No, but when it's with fan fiction, not only does it allow them to keep their identities more secure, but it allows them to put their work out there on the internet, which has definitely helped its presence become more noticed in the last 30 years. It's basically allowed them to keep their anonymity, but also like improve themselves. Because I can guarantee you, there's authors who probably wrote stuff 20 years ago that, I mean, as you said, the stories you read over like 20 years ago,
yeah.
they were terrible. But I would wager you £10 if you were to find those authors again. There's like a 50 chance they probably still writing, or maybe they've written something
Maybe they've
in
written
the
their
last
own
five
book.
years,
Yeah,
or their own book, and they are bestsellers, or they are good writers of their own right. It's all about experience, really.
it's all about learning and experience. The best way to start is to do it already established, really. I
Mm,
would say it's a very, like, if I was ever to become a creative writer, that is where I would start.
And I won't go into more in-depth stuff because I'm being cheeky,
Mhm.
but I'm going to say it right here and right now. I have got treatments for two stories that could potentially become fan fiction.
Right.
Yeah, and for being a bit of a tease here, one of them is an IP that I will not divulge because I'm still working out the kinks of it. But one that's a bit more developed is an IP that My Hero Academia.
Well, hey.
So I have a story that may one day see the light of day, and who knows, maybe down the line I might sharing a link, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. But yeah, the point is to sort of wrap things up in a way. I think the main thing to take away from this episode is that fan fiction is out there, and the sad thing is it has a stigma against it,
Yeah.
and with reason. Because I mean,
It's kind of like Marmite. You love it or you hate it.
yeah,
Like, there's no... That's quite a good way of summing it up, I think.
yeah.
You love it or you hate it. I think it should be loved by most, though. Just even if people don't want to partake in fan fiction, you know, it's got its benefits for everyone. It's got multiple benefits in multiple different ways for multiple different people. So, you know, if it's at the end of the day, if it's not your thing, you don't have to read it. But it's out there if you're thinking, wow, My Hero Academia is just finished. And now I don't know what to do with my life. Everyone knows that feeling when you finish a series and you're like, now what? And that existential dread gets kind of put towards, now I need to search for more content from this world. And, you know, fan fiction fills that void, which is really, really nice for some people to, if they really desperately want more story from that universe, you know?
Yeah. And yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's just fun. Because some days, when you look at a book, whether it's on a literal paperback book or if it's on your tablet, sometimes it's, again, you have to really want to take an interest in the book or the title, but sometimes you just want something quick and easy that you can access on your phone. And also, depending on your interests at the time, I mean, heck, I've just watched a Marvel movie. Oh, I want to read something Marvel related. I'm sure there's something good out there. Oh, I just finished a cool episode of Naruto. I wonder what would happen if this had happened instead.
Yeah.
Or what could... There were endless possibilities with fan fiction that fans themselves can come up with such creative concepts. Some that are more so than the actual creators, because they have the benefit of the IP, but also the imagination to say, what if?
Yeah.
What if this happened? What if this did that? Why did this happen? I want to explain that. I refuse this ending because it was shit.
Yeah.
I'm going to write a better one.
Game of Thrones. Could also... the stories can be massive. Like, fan fictions can be really big. Like, there's some fan fiction artists out there which have been writing for years, and they keep going and they keep going and stuff like that, to the point where it's even bigger than the original, like, actual IP. But there's also really, really small ones as well. There's really small ones, just little tidbits, just like maybe a little side story of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. What would have happened if this happened instead? It could be an alternate universe, you know. It could be this or that. And it's actually just come to mind. I have probably actually recently delved into fan fiction in that case, which in my mind, when we first talked about it at the beginning of this episode, I didn't consider it fan fiction, but I guess now that more that we talk about it, I guess it does count as fan fiction. It's just Warhammer 40k stories.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but loads of the fans behind that are so creative. They can make their own lore, their own aliens, their own races, their own planets, their own stories. Like, it can be as small as, like, making a story about a troop, like a Imperial Guardsman going into battle on a planet against Tyranids. It could be as small as that, or it could be this whole elaborate empire, this whole new race that fits into the world just because people love the world that much. And Warhammer as well is a very, very big IP. You know, it's a very open IP. There's so much to it that you can pretty much put whatever you want into the world, and as long as it's grim, dark, and awful, it fits, you know? So it allows that kind of creativity for some people to get it out, and, you know, lots of people have made such fantastic small bits of lore for things like Warhammer.
Indeed. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, what I want people to take away from this episode is that we can understand if you don't like it, if you never will get into it, because that's your opinion at the end of the day. But I would say, being very blunt, honestly, give it a chance, because you might be surprised with what you find. Because I've read some stories that have really turned around my perception of a story, or they've made the story that much more enjoyable. So much so that I like to continue revisiting that world, even if that world, show, movie ended up disappointing me in the end, because it's the imaginations. It's one of our greatest strengths as human beings, creating imagination and creating such stories that can capture our imagination. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's fun. It's fun to
Yeah,
read.
it's a fun thing.
So
Should
what?
be called Fanfiction. Right, I'll be leaving now.
But yeah, it's fun at the end of the day. Reading is fun, and fans can be very creative, sometimes even more so than the people who are paid to create things, and because it comes from a place of genuine passion.
Genuine passion for the IP, yeah, rather than what's going to generate us the most money.
Hmm. And yeah, with that, that's the main bulk of the discussion point. But I would like to end up with some little recommendation stories that I have read that I think should be highlighted. And they're not in any specific order. So I don't want people to take away the start and the last, or like the best or the worst. But these are all great stories that I've had the pleasure of reading. Some of them I'm still reading, honestly, because things have happened, life's happened, so I've had to stop for a while. But I intend to finish them. And I'll start off, of course, with Harry Potter.
Yep.
Now, this is a very, and I would like to make it clear here. So I've got the names of the authors in here as well, but some of them are it's in the internet, so some of them are crazy titles. But I'll try my best. But the first story is called. Well, this is actually a series of stories called. Overall, they're called Lion Snake Chronicles, and this is a series by Terista.
That's probably the closest I would get as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
apologies, but yeah, this series is basically a reimagining of the story of Harry Potter. But the twist with this one is that Harry is sorted into Slytherin, and you'd think, oh, there's plenty of stories about that. I'm sure there's like thousands. There are likely, but this was actually one of the first ones I discovered that tackled the concept, and honestly, they do it very well, and yet it's also vastly different because Harry is partnered with the Slytherins. He's partnered with Draco Malfoy, and the dynamic. It stays true, in my opinion, to the books, to the characters, but it really
I
makes
personally
sense.
always thought, what if Harry got sorted into Slytherin? So that already, that idea, like that thought I've had unconsciously, has been made into a fan fiction. So I can know, like, from someone who's probably quite good at writing, could flesh out a story to see what it might actually turn out like.
Mm. And honestly, I think the biggest takeaway for me with this story is how the story handles the relationship between Harry and all the other Slytherins, because a lot of them are given more presence in the story because like they're more prominent. So we get to see characters like Pansy Parkinson's, like Crabbe and Goyle, like Draco Malfoy, and more importantly, Severus Snape take a bit more center stage in Harry's life.
Harry Potter.
Yeah, and it's really, really interesting to read, especially with how they're developed. Because Draco and him, they still start off as very like frustrated with each other, like in the actual books. But the dynamic and how their relationship changes and evolves over the stories, it's so much fun to read. And for for a bit more context, there are currently four installments as of now, last I checked. And so the series is not finished. I don't know if it's continued yet or if it's on hiatus maybe. But the point is, there's four great stories so far that people can check out that I would highly recommend they check out, because if you're a Harry Potter fan and you're a Slytherin fan, this definitely hits the mark there for you. And I think it's a fun read.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Like that one.
The other one, there's four in total. The ones I want to mainly highlight, and these ones are Game of Thrones ones. Now, the first story is actually one of the first few Game of Thrones fics I discovered. And this was actually not long after. No, actually, I tell a lie. It was before season 8 aired. Now, this is a story called Home by Roll Todd. And this is basically an alternative version of season 8. So this story picks up literally where season 7 ended. And the author basically tried to tell their version of how they thought season 8 would go. And shock or horror, when the final season came out and was a terrible mess, I went back to this story and I thought, damn it, why couldn't this story be Game of Thrones season 8? Because this tackles the story so much more in depth, and it's still very much feels like Game of Thrones. If anything, I would say if this had been the actual ending to the show, I think people would very much say, yeah, this is what should have happened. And there's some great fan fictions out there that delve into what if season 8 stuff, but I would say this is a perfect example of how to do it well. And they even wrap up certain storylines in a satisfying way that don't, honestly, if you were to tell me how they would have wrapped it up, it would be my version of how they should have ended it is completely different to how it ends in this story, but it's still satisfying as hell
Yeah.
because it takes into account what was set up in early seasons of Thrones. It takes elements from the book series to help it be a bit more authentic and part of the world, and it's a fun read. And I should also state that this story does does have some very steamy stuff in it.
Well, I mean, Game of Thrones does. So that is not exactly going erotica. That is just staying true to the IP, if anything.
Yeah, but it is a good read. And if you're a fan out there who is still frustrated with season 8 and you want to read something that can scratch that itch, Home would be the first story I would recommend. The second one is a bit more unique because this one is actually a trilogy of stories that they take more influence from the books, really.
Mm.
And this is a trilogy of stories called Ned Stark Lives, and the title says it all.
Yeah, by C.B. Stevp. So yeah, I think the one problem with trying to pronounce these authors' names is a lot of them are just like random internet names. So a lot of them are just random collections of letters.
Yeah.
So that is CBSTEVP. So you let me know how to actually say that.
But yeah, as the title suggests, this is basically what would happen if the War of the Five Kings progressed, but Ned Stark wasn't executed. And again, this would take too long to delve into any kind of explanation. But I'll just say this: it is such a good story that it delves so much into Ned as a character in the situations he's put in during the war, and it ends in a way I wasn't expecting, but it still ends good. And if you again, this is scratching the interest of what do you think would happen if Ned had lived. This is definitely a series that I would recommend first off the bat because it is such a cool way it takes on the story,
and it takes it from early on in the story as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that turn out different, and it was a fun
butterfly
read.
effect.
Yeah,
isn't it? So like everything would have been different if this character lived or this character died. You know, I like that where they take a character that had so much potential, killed off early, and then they make it so that is one of the main characters in the story instead. That's a cool idea.
Nothing else said to that really. And yeah, so the next one after that is actually a quite a recent one I discovered, and honestly, off the bat, the title. It's not a bad title, but it was like the title got me concerned at first, but it's warmed on me since, and the story itself has really taken the punch in being really well.
Mm.
And this is what this story is called, "Howl of the Dragon Wolves" by
Elphaba 818 and Longclaw 16.
Thank you. And this story basically picks up years after the events of season 8. So all that shit happened in the show. That happened. That's canon. But the twist with this story is that it reveals that Jon and Daenerys actually had kids before they both died. Well, for a bit of context, Jon, he still ends up going beyond the wall, but then he ends up dying, I believe. But yeah, so this story's main character, or main set of characters, are not any of the existing Game of Thrones characters. It's 2 original characters. And these are the kids of Jon and Daenerys. And the story kicks off with them, but then it takes a full. Well, it's not a surprise. It's set up pretty much in the summary, but essentially it ends up taking a 180 when you find out that it's not a post Game of Thrones story. It's actually a time travel story.
Oh,
so what happens is that they end up going back in time to the events of the War of the Five Kings, and they make it their mission to basically set a future on a better path. So think Terminator.
Yeah.
So they basically, cool. And what's also cool is that they actually end up getting separated, and both of them end up with their mother and father, respectively. And from there, the story will go, and things are eventually going to collide at some point. But I think at the end of the day, what's great about this story is that it's just well written and very wholesome, because you've got this underlying story of a family essentially forming and also reuniting in a way, especially with these 2 kids who never had or a normal family, at least because of their upbringing and how circumstances happened with their parents. And I think that the add-on is the fact that it's basically Game of Thrones, and the author made it clear that, oh yeah, we're going to do season 8 better. Well, not better, but they're going to do their fun take on it. And so far, with several chapters in, I've already loved every chapter, and I'm really looking forward to continuing it. And this is still going, so color me excited. The last Game of Thrones one is actually a last minute one, but I thought I'd recommend it just because it's such a different one that I didn't think I would take an interest in. But this is a story by Spectre for Hire, and this one is called Our Blades Are Sharp. And this what's cool about this story is that this is based around a character who doesn't appear in the show or the books. This is actually a character who was killed off before the story even begins. So, for context, in Game of Thrones, we all know Ramsay Bolton.
Yeah.
Well,
we know him.
Oh, yeah. And so basically, we find out through dialogue from him that he had a brother once, but who was the heir to his family. But he mysteriously died, and it's heavily implied that Ramsay poisoned him so he could be the sole heir. But this story takes the alternative route of what if that hadn't happened? What if he had survived? And from there, it basically goes into the story of Game of Thrones, but this one main character is part of the story now, and it delves into him visiting Winterfell, joining the Starks, becoming a ward there. He actually begins a bit of a romance with Sansa Stark.
Oh, so he's actually a good Bolton.
Yes.
I was just thinking, oh great, last thing we need is another fucking Bolton.
Yeah, they take the good kid route, and it's really fun because he's a very endearing character.
Wonder Ramsay killed him off.
But he's a very endearing character, but he's also very, very complex because he still has a lot of history to deal with his family, especially with his father, considering the kind of guy his father is.
Absolutely psychotic brother as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool twists not twists, but one of the cool concepts that is set up early on is that he actually does, in some form, care about his brother, and he wants to reunite with him, but he doesn't know what Ramsay's like. He just knows that he has a bastard brother out there, and he wants to see him one day. So that's going to be a future storyline that could be interesting.
That'll be very interesting.
And I'm again, so same as the last one. I've only discovered this recently, so I'm still reading it. But already, I would say this is definitely a must-read, especially if you like the World of Thrones and you want to try something with a character that's a bit more on the original scale, kind of like the last one. Yeah, and the next one we actually delve into Marvel. Now, this one is the only Marvel one because I actually discovered this one after Endgame had released, and I was very much in the mindset of, I loved Endgame. I want to see more. Might as well try the fanfiction side, see what they have to offer. And this one stood out because me being a big Spider-Man fan, you always there's bound. I think we all said this at one point after seeing the movie. What would happen if it was Peter who had gotten the gauntlet and made the choice to snap? And this is a very nice story, but also a very heartbreaking story because it's only 6 chapters, I believe, but sorry, the title itself. It's called "It Wasn't Supposed to Be You," and this is by seeing thoughts through words.
Yep, that's right.
But yeah, so this story is basically that Peter, during the final battle to defeat Thanos and his army, he gets hold of the gauntlet, he snaps it, and he ends up dying. And the story from then on focuses on
that would
everyone
make Tony
else.
Stark go really dark.
Yeah,
I like the idea of Dark Stark.
Mm-hmm.
Just he goes a bit nuts. It could lead into a lot more open things for Iron Man, because I was very sad that the story of Iron Man is pretty much ended. It started with Iron Man and it ended with Iron Man. It was only right, but there was so much I wanted to see off of Tony Stark, which we could see in the multiverse kind of stuff, but in this kind of story it could make way for him to make the Infinity Suit and all sorts of crazy things. He'll probably get really, really obsessed with trying to protect his friends to the point where he almost becomes a bad guy.
The possibilities are endless with Marvel. Well, concept at least. And this is one of those very, very nice stories I'd recommend because it's a very brutal one considering the concept of the story, but it's just so wonderfully done with how everyone reacts to the situation, because this is, again, in universe, this is a kid, a 16-year-old kid, or 15 or 14, but however young Spider-Man was during that time, this is a kid who gave up his life to save the universe. How do you react to that? Especially if you yourself had the intent of being the one to make that sacrifice. The guilt would be so immense. And also, how does this affect everyone else, considering what this kid was? This kid was a hero.
Especially a kid that you were mentoring as well.
Mm.
You know.
And yeah, this is the only Marvel one I'd recommend, because all the other ones didn't really measure up, in my opinion. I have yet to read another one that really hit the mark from me. Honestly,
this one sounds like a good one.
Yeah, if anyone knows any better ones, well, equally good ones, let me know. But I would say this is definitely one I would strongly support.
It sounds a bit what ify, you know, like quite literally the series I'm talking about. You know, the series What If. It sounds like it would be an episode on one of those.
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if one day they try that. they've got 2 seasons coming out.
They did try a lot with What If. They did try a lot.
So yeah, into the last section here, and these stories are definitely some of the more recent ones, and ones that I would strongly recommend because, again, I'm a big fan of the IP right now.
Yeah.
And so this is the My Hero Academia selection, and the first one I have to kick off with, again, there's no specific order, but I would consider all of these to be very wonderful works, and I will specify sometimes. Again, the writing style can vary. There are some mistakes sometimes because these are authors, amateurs at the end of the day, but they are very passionate and it comes through in the writing. So I would say, regardless of that, they are wonderful. So I would recommend giving them a shot at least. And the first one I have to recommend is actually the first ever My Hero fanfiction I discovered, and that is A Beacon in the Dark by Noah Hijiachi. And this story basically tells the traditional story of My Hero, but with the twist that when Izuku Midoriya turned 4 years old, he ended up going blind. And he basically has to deal with the consequences of that. And, well, not consequence, the lifestyle change, really, of that you lose your sight, and there's no reason why. He assumes he's quirkless, and
it's particularly distressing if you had your sight before and then you lose it, you know.
And, yeah, this, as you'll find out, this story eventually continues on, and we find out that, what happened is that you lost your sight because of your quirk developing. So he has a quirk in this canon, and from there the story goes on to become. Again, I don't want to say any more for spoilers because it becomes a big crux for the story going forward. But in short summary, he meets someone and they encourage him to keep going, and from there he goes on to meet All Might, and from there the story continues into the story of My Hero. And I think the main thing I love about this story is that not only is it a cool what if, as you said, that tackles a cool concept that you wouldn't consider, but it also handles Midoriya in such a fun way because of this disability, he had to essentially grow up a bit more. So he's not the shrinking violet that we know from the main show. He's actually got a bit of a cheeky backbone to him, and it's a lot of fun to read, especially when it concerns his friends and the villains. But also the turmoil and the consequences that he has to deal with, primarily when it comes to his disability, because his quirk is helpful for him, but he's still blind, and he still has to deal with a lot of difficulties. I feel like I'm not selling it enough, but I want to strongly say that this is a story that I would recommend checking out, purely for the fact that it's a cool concept. The story is very nicely thought out. Sadly, it is on hiatus, but as of now. But even then, I would say it gets to a nice point where you could stop there. And if this was to be the ending point, if it never was to continue, I'd be okay with that, because it doesn't end in an end way, but it ends in a way where it's not on a cliffhanger. And I feel like I can kind of guess what could happen going forward or might happen. But the story that we've gotten to explore with it so far has been so fulfilling. And also, just to make it clear here, this is actually the story that introduced me to the concept of Izuku being in a relationship with Todoroki.
Yeah.
So,
interesting ship. I like it.
And they do it justice, in my opinion. They do it a cool take on it.
Yeah.
And it's fun to read. So yeah, that's the first story. The next one, equally fun, and this is Detective Midoriya by Rogue Pterodactyl. And as the title suggests, this story delves with the idea of after meeting All Might and after the guy crushed his dreams,
Yeah.
he decides to not become a hero. He takes his advice, but he ends up meeting and discovering a new dream after a chance encounter with some police officers, and he ends up deciding to become a detective. And
Which is a very cool idea.
mm,
Very cool.
yeah, considering his
Seems like the story could have easily gone in that direction as well.
and also considering his acute mind and the imagination he has for hero analysis,
Yeah.
it definitely works well with the concept here. And also, I think what's fun about this one is the relationship dynamic he has with the police force, because they make them into a very wholesome team, especially with the main detective from the show. They pretty much form a father-son bond, which is quite a lot of fun to read, especially when All Might ends up coming along, and that causes conflicts between the two, because that's my not son-in-law you're talking about right there, mate. He's good. So don't you underestimate him. And yeah, this is a fun one. I think what also took my interest with this one is the dynamic that Izuku has with some of the villains. Because I won't spoil anything, but in short, Izuku impresses a lot of people, considering he's just a quirkless kid trained to become an officer.
Yeah.
But yeah, he catches the eye of a few people, and it develops in a way that is surprising, honestly. Some might say it's a bit out of character, but I would say it works with the story, with the tone the story sets up. And if anything, it makes it a lot more interesting. And I would say if this was to be the canon story of Game of Thrones, of My Hero, I would generally say, oh, I would like this. I wouldn't mind this development because this is such a cool angle they go with. And if anything, it shows how yeah, people, we may have heroes, we may have villains, but they are people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And
people.
it's a fun read, this one.
I like the idea that he might work with hawks as well, a bit closer.
Mm-hmm. So we've got 3 more to get through, and we'll shoot through these ones because I just realised the time's running out. But the next one is called Palm to Palm by Straw Hat Pirate. And this one, very, very simple premise. What would happen if Izuku lost his mother when he was younger, and he had a quirk, but was then adopted by All Might? And this one I would recommend purely because it is such a feel-good father-son-dad story. Because, again, context, Usuka has a quirk, and bit of a spoiler, but it's the first chapter. It's pretty much set up from the synopsis, I believe, too. But All Might, he's wounded because of his fight with All for One. And Izuku's quirk heals him. And All Might feels compelled, not as just a hero, but as a good human being, for this little kid who went out of his way to help him. He decides to adopt Midoriya. And from there, you've got some great chapters of him learning the ways of how to become a father, how to be there for this kid who's lost his mother, who's got to deal with a quirk that has a very dangerous setback with it. But it's so wholesome, so much fun, and let's just say this, with the most recent chapter, it leaves a lot of interesting angles the story could go with going forward. The next one is called Leviathan by Rest in Rip. And this one is purely recommended here because it explores the angle of what if Izuku had a kaiju-like quirk.
Kind of like the dragon girl. Well, I don't actually know her name.
Yeah, me neither. But essentially, Izuku has a quirk that is very dangerous. And when he was very young, there was a villain attack. He got kidnapped. But then this big creature came out of nowhere and just made a lot of damage and killed a lot of civilians.
Yeah, I can imagine being a Leviathan class size. You know, Leviathan is no joke when it comes to actual, like, what classifies as a Leviathan. Like, it could be massive. Like, Godzilla-esque is barely a Leviathan. You know?
Yeah, this story definitely delves into a lot of a very stress-filled Midoriya. And this story is so cool because of not only just the concept and also how it deals with the situation of, oh, you've got a quirk that is so dangerous, but also the guilt that he feels because he killed people and he was only 4 years old. How do you deal with that? And not tell anyone about that
and also not become a villain with that, you know?
Yeah.
And also fight that whole bit.
It's got to deal with such a dangerous quirk and such a world that would be so ready to just condemn him. And Yeah, I think what's also cool about this one is that this has quite a lot of artwork dedicated to it. So there's a lot of fun concepts that people delve with it in the artwork world that I would say give it a bit more leverage. I believe this story is also on hold now, sadly, but that I would not let that deter you. It is a great read, and especially if you like monster-based concepts that deal with the grappling of like control and dread, it's really well recommended. The last two is the next one, sorry, is called Razmataz.
Razzmatazz, yeah.
Cool. By Exalphone.
By Xylophone.
Xylophone. Thank you. And this is another simple premise one where Izuku, he basically meets All Might a lot earlier. He basically ends up stumbling across the hero when he moves into his family's local area, his apartment complex, and they just end up becoming acquaintances early on in canon. But it has a big change because they essentially become mentor student quite early on, and All Might sees his heroic ambition and tendencies much early on too. So it basically has this snowball effect where you see the stories play out in a similar vein, but in such a different way. It's a fun, again, another fun what if that I think is a lot of good, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I'm struggling to come up with different variations, but this is a fun one, especially if you like, again, if you like Midoriya and All Might as a dynamic, with their friendship and with their father son dynamic too, and also Inko in this one too. She's a lot of fun to read because she's also so wholesome.
Oh,
And I'll just say this: it ends the first story at least. This one ends with such a great, declaration from Midoriya, and I would strongly recommend it just for that bit to get to that bit where Izuku fights Stain, and he has that moment of declaring his ambition as a hero and his goal. It's so much fun to read. And with that, we get to the last one. Now, this one is fun because when I first read it, I thought, no way.
good God, this looks amazing.
But this one is called, God damn it, Crasvia Parabellum.
That was actually not too bad. Crasvivir Parabellum, I think, is kind of as close as we can get to it.
Thank you. But I translated it just to be safe. And the English title is Prepare for War to Live Tomorrow by Anfanute. And this story is basically what would happen if John Wick was killed, but was then reborn in the body of Izuku Midoriya.
Wow. He would be unstoppable. That is the answer.
Yeah.
That is the answer. Imagine if he had the gun that did quirk stopping. Oh my God, no one would be safe. No one would be safe.
Yeah, what's great about this one is if you're a fan of John Wick and My Hero, this is up your alley. And
it wouldn't be all for one, it would be all for Wick.
What's great about this one is that it delves into the idea of this is really a sequel to the story of John Wick, really, and it's fun because it delves into the idea of what would this guy hero do? Well, not hero. What would this former assassin do if he woke up in a world of heroes and he's like, oh, you get to start anew now. What's your goal going to be? What do you want to be as a hero, as a person? Do you want to continue to be what you were good at, or do you want to try something different? Do you want to be a hero, or do you think you're okay to be a hero, or acceptable to be a hero?
And this kind of story as well is like the true essence of a fan fiction, where it's a mishmash of characters from different stories come together. And that idea does get explored a lot in lots of different fan fictions. And it can create very, very interesting scenarios. And to be honest, that is quite creative. I never would have thought John Wick in an anime, My Hero Academia. That just never crossed my mind. Now I'm thinking that sounds pretty damn cool.
Honestly, I would strongly recommend this one for you personally because it's been fun so far, and it's good. It looks like it could be going into some interesting places.
Okay.
And for a bit more context, there's two stories because that's the series full title in of itself. But the actual installments. The first story is called Sisvil's Pesum. Again, sorry.
Sivis Pakim. Do you know what? One of those might be right, or both of them might be horrendously wrong.
Maybe.
Most likely that one.
But the English title is If You Want Peace. And that is the main story. That's the story the main bulk of the story there. It has another story alongside it, which is Ama Vincent Ominit. Again, English title, Love Conquers All. And this is it's literally just a Valentine's Day special. It's one chapter, and it's a fun little read because it's basically just an adjunct chapter to the main story. There's nothing, you wouldn't really need to read it, but it's fun because of the concept of, you've got this, John Wick. He's in the body of a 15-year-old by this point, and he's in school. He's got to deal with kids, some kids who really like him, some kids who hate his guts, and he's like, I don't care. Again, just imagine John Wick there, and the story writes itself.
In like a Japanese high school Valentine romance. That is hilarious.
Yeah, but also it's just very wholesome because of how he's got a mum to look after. He's got a friend in the form of Bakugo, and it's just really, really wholesome in how he, in his own way, tries to deal with them because he's got people in his life now that he didn't have before in his first life. And yeah, in a wrap up, really, all of these stories I would recommend just because of the creativity that the authors have clearly put into each and every one of them. And if by some miracle any of them somehow end up fun in this episode, I have to say, each and every one of you, thank you so much for writing these stories. They have been a joy to read. And if some of you are still writing them, I look forward to reading future chapters and seeing what you would do with them. For those of you who have taken hiatus or have decided to cancel them,
you do you.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you make your own choices because that's up to you.
But we miss you.
That is true, but I will accept whatever the situation needs to do because
I even think major manga artists could take a page out of that book as well. Take some breaks sometimes, man. Manga artists work way too hard. Way too hard, man, to the point where they get sick of their own series a lot of the time because they have to work so hard on it. Take One Punch Man's author as well as My Hero Academia's author. They both talk to each other quite a lot. And the One Punch Man author said to the My Hero Academia author to chill out and take a break because he thinks he needs it, because he's just pushing on with the story and keeps going and keeps going. The One Punch Man artist one actually turned around to the My Hero Academia artist and was just like, dude, you need to chill.
Yeah. But yeah, at the end of the day, you've done some wonderful stuff here, and I'd say take what time you need when you required, but know that you've done some very wonderful work, and I've enjoyed it immensely. So many other people have likely enjoyed it as well. I mean, based off the views, based off the community themselves, you already likely know that. So yeah, thank you so much, and I wish you all the best with whatever you choose to do next. And with that, I'd say that's a nice little wrap up there. Little odd episode, honestly, but I enjoyed talking about it. It's nice to give these stories a bit of a highlight. And thank you so much, Liln, for joining me for the occasion.
No worries. Pleasure to be here. Learned a lot about fan fiction and even realised I probably like fan fiction more than I sought to realise with my newest obsession, Warhammer. So, yeah.
It's amazing what can sometimes surprise you.